All right. Well, good afternoon. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope you are well. I hope your week is going okay for you. I'm joining from Amiskwaci, Waskahigan, Treaty 6 territory. It is and I was talking with Patricia and where she's joining from. It is smoky here. It's hitting my allergies, but nonetheless, it is a good day. When we woke up this morning, when we rose and we, stepped into wherever we needed to step into business, maybe it's, a seminar or a conference, your community, that it's a good day because that sun rose in the east. Creator, we walk in Creator's world and we're always surrounded by that goodness. So no matter where we are, smoke or not, we acknowledge that Creator has given us another day. But with that said, I also want to acknowledge those communities that the wildfires that are happening in here in Alberta and beyond, that they are devastating to some communities. They've absolutely devastating. So we want to acknowledge and we want to offer good prayer, good energy, good thought towards those communities that are struggling profoundly and deeply and tragically. People have lost their homes. And so we want to extend, prayers and good thoughts towards them, that they might find that strength, that they would find that support as they go through this journey. So we don't want to take it lightly, that we have smoke in the air. We acknowledge that this crisis is just that, it's a crisis. So we do want to give thanks for the gifts that are all around us, the gift of land, the gift of Grandfather Sky, Mother Earth, the sacred waters, all of the medicines that Creator has given to us through this land, all of the animals. So we just take a moment to acknowledge that there's goodness that is around us and within us, right? We are our own medicine. Creator has given us so many good resources within ourselves. So welcome to Can Do Webinar Wednesday. This is an opportunity where we can learn, we can just take in the good knowledge that is being shared. We can build on our own capacity. Oftentimes when I leave, I leave inspired. And so I hope that you leave with good medicine, with the good knowledge today, that we dream big for our communities and for our nations. So it is my honor to introduce Patricia. She is joining us actually from, did you say Calgary, Patricia?
I am. I'm in
She's
Calgary today.
joining us from Treaty 7 territory, which is not where she's from. So she is a Métis Cree woman, originally from northern Saskatchewan, Buffalo Narrows, who has been immersed in economic development activity throughout the province. As former co-chair of the Saskatchewan Indigenous Economic Development Network, so she's, bringing with her a lot of good knowledge, a lot of experience working within Treaty 4 territory as an Indigenous economic development specialist. She connects with communities and economic and business development corporations as a pathfinder to resource specifically with the 24 First Nations, 3 tribal councils, and a Western Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. So previously, as a business advisor, economic development with Qu'Appelle Tribal Councils, FHQ developments, her role included the advancements and promotion of entrepreneurial pursuits as she continues to provide pathfinding resources. And the list, let me tell you, her bio, the list could go on and on. So we honor, the path that she has walked in the journey under that umbrella of economic development. So some of the topics today are economic development advisor role, entrepreneurship ecosystems, regional, provincial, national supports, creating space for entrepreneurship, and then there's going to be an opportunity for any open discussion. So we are in the midst of greatness. I love when our women come and share what they know, share what they have walked. So Patricia, we are honored that you are here with us today. So thank you so much. Sorry, my camera keeps moving. Thank you so much for being with us. We honor, right? She's in the middle of a conference and she's making space for us to bring her good knowledge. So thank you for like pressing pause in your day to be here. Her t-shirt, her sweater says change maker. And let me say that is what you are. So thank you for being here. And I'm passing this virtual mic off to you.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you to Can-Do and the whole Can-Do team in terms of the invitation. I'm going to apologize for my voice. As you already are aware, a lot of our northern communities, including out here in Alberta, are under heavy fire. And the smoke is actually getting to me, and I apologize. So I've got lots of beverages around me. So I also want to acknowledge and give thanks to the participants today. I recognize some of the names from the community, and I see one of my co-workers there, so I appreciate the support, much appreciated. As noted, I like the chat. I can see the chat as we're going through and before I share my screen, so I would love to, be interactive as much as possible as we go through. So I'd like to, welcome in Jesse and Vicky and Trista and Tasman and Rob. And we've got lots of treaty territory coverage in terms of the participants here today. So it's much appreciated. As said, my pronouns are she and her. And as stated, I am from the Northern Saskatchewan village of Buffalo Narrows, and that village right now has been evacuated, and I'm waiting just in terms of any additional news. And so when I was talking, I got a little bit emotional this morning, just, in terms of things that we had to do to prepare for our day. And so we always talk about where we're from in terms of our traditional lands and waters. And, we call them Big Buffalo and Little Buffalo, the Churchill and the Peter Pond. And you would think that territory that's almost completely surrounded by water wouldn't be devastated by forest fires. But unfortunately, a lot of our northern communities are not immune to that. But as stated, we're here with gratitude, and I'd like to also give thanks to the ancestors of Treaty 7. When we come into new territory, we get welcomed as guests, as visitors, and so there's a lot of individuals here for the Forward Summit event, and so we want to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and Confederacy and the Nakota Nations and the Métis Nation and of course the Tusini, the Dene Nation that we're standing on today. So as stated, my current role and title is Indigenous Economic Development Specialist, working within Treaty 4 of the province. And we do cover all of the nations and the Métis regions. And so I just want to get started and share my screen. And I want to encourage you to do the questions as they come up. We may hold off on answering the questions until the end, but as we go through the presentation, if something comes up or you have a thought, just plop it into the chat right away, and then we'll make sure that we address it later. Tara, can you see my screen? Okay, good. And so again, we're talking about entrepreneurship pathfinding, promoting and supporting entrepreneurs in our communities. And so this particular presentation was with First Nations and Métis economic development roles in mind. I want to thank Annie Charles and Victoria Gagne for lending their photos to this. And so when we think about what our roles are as it relates to economic development, a lot of times it's advisory services, support with resources, tools, creating, delivering, and connecting on business opportunities, engaging with organizations, and of course, networking. And with economic development, there's just as many titles as there are services that we provide. And so realizing that entrepreneurs will look towards some of these roles and say, what's available to us? Where do we go? Where do we get started? And so I always remind people that it's within your capacity to at least be a pathfinder or at least a little bit of a guide. So I'm hoping that this presentation is going to present you with some starting points, some starting thoughts, and also some of you may be even more, versed in terms of entrepreneurship, more subject matter experts than expertise than even I have. And so with that in mind, there's some common goals or guiding principles for these roles. And so CanDo, of course, works with a lot of economic development officers, and a lot of times it's around new business. It's around investment opportunities. It can be facilitating training. It can be around seminars, networking events that are essential to economic development. And of course, we're there as supports to our nations, First Nations and Métis Nation, and of course to the individuals. And so that can be individuals like as a person or as a business or as a corporation. And so we have to be armed with a lot of resources and a lot of tools to help create, deliver, and connect on business opportunities, not only within our own borders, but beyond our borders. And I'll explain that as we go on. So depending on if you're on reserve, off reserve, if you're on an urban reserve, if you're part of a municipality, sometimes you're part of a provincial network, sometimes you're national, and we even have individuals that have expanded into e-commerce and trade. And so understanding that these organizations, networks, and partners, when it comes to resources, building capacity and sharing best business practices. And so as Pathfinders, we've got a lot of things on our plate. Sometimes people can refer to us as stated business advisors. We need to be aware of entrepreneurship networks, what's available. Also what's available in terms of online resources, market research, where we start, business plan templates, business guides, a basic understanding of the incubators, accelerators, the cultivators, and ideation labs. And so as stated, if there's any questions about any of these as they come up, if you want a little bit more information, the remainder of my presentation will be focused on all of those resources. So pathfinding, it's commonly also referred to as wayfinding. And the reason that people refer to it as wayfinding, because it's really easy to lose your way. Because there's so much information out there. And so I want to say kudos to some of the resources that we're going to share, because there's so much going on in this space around entrepreneurship. But as I said, it's good to have a guide. It's good to have somebody that can help you on your way and help out, highlight that path as you go forward. And a reminder before we get into the rest of the presentation, as economic development officers and or relationship managers or support individuals, and sometimes we've got chief and council members who are also doing economic development portfolios, that we have to remember just to be a person that we can be leaned on. Just lean on us for that guidance. Lean on us for those questions. So as Michelle said, these are going to be the topics of today. I'm not going to repeat them, but we are going to have room for an open discussion before we end the day. So I am not going to apologize about not being able to know my language. But last week we heard from Shannon Peston, and Shannon, of course, shared her personal journey into entrepreneurship. And we were coming up with a word in terms of who are entrepreneurs. How do we define entrepreneurship for ourselves? And so I did a little bit of research, and I came up, and Gordon, maybe you can help me, but it in terms of the word otapimsamu, it means their own boss, or their or the free people. And it's a version of the word otapimsawak, are those that rule themselves. And so it's a reminder to ourselves that as people of the land, people of the waters, that we've always been able to provide for ourselves, that we've always been able to survive, whether it's off the land or creating opportunities. And so in these pictures, there's Cassie Desjardins, Jane Sanderson, Minnie Bowden, and Taylor Belanger. Individuals, from our communities, from our provinces that are leading the way and being their own bosses in their own way. And so entrepreneurs really represent themselves. They represent their families, they represent their communities, and they represent their roots. And as they rise on their journey, they never forget that the work that they're doing today is not only just for themselves and for their livelihood, their economic livelihood, but that it's for future generations. And so we may be pathfinders in terms of helping entrepreneurs on their way, but entrepreneurs are helping us and those future generations in terms of paving the way in terms of small and medium-sized and enterprises. And so it's really important that when entrepreneurs reach out to us as business advisors or as specialists, that we really get to know the person, not just the business idea. And the reason for that is not just in terms of how to better direct them. So for example, if you're a woman, if you're a youth, if you're using language in your business, that helps us to understand. If you're doing arts and crafts, it helps us to direct you to the funding resources, to the organizations that can best service your needs. The other part of that is understanding where they are on their entrepreneurship journey. And so I would suggest, creating a template of questions that you can ask individuals just to help them pathfind to the right resources. So for example, as I said, on reserve makes a big difference, off reserve, where they are on their entrepreneurship journey. We'll touch base on that a little bit in the next slides. One last tip before we leave this slide is that reminding you as advisors that everybody may have a dream or a vision. And this dream or vision translates into a business idea. And every person has a unique set of skills, experience, expertise, knowledge, and passion. And so it's not up to us to offer advice on the idea or on their goals. And so that can be very hard sometimes because, it's not about judgment, but, I'm going to go start this clothing line about young, dope, and Indigenous. And my attitude is like, do we really want to use the word dope in a sentence? And so again, it's not up to us to offer advice on the idea or on their goals. We're there as a support. And so again, as we get to know the individual and where they are in their journey, that helps us direct them. And then even if it's a full-time venture, is it a side hustle? Is it a tech startup? So all of these questions that we need to ask to best direct individuals, are they purchasing an existing business? Are they looking at franchising, or are they thinking of starting a cooperative? And so this information is important to help as we move forward. This is Adriana Gervais, and so she's a stay-at-home mom that's been making skirts, and she started making skirts just for her children and for herself. And she's at that point where she's at startup, where she has a business idea. She hasn't quite put it into a business plan. And so she's at that startup phase, and we're talking about business basics. How do I get started? How do I incorporate? What kind of business structure do I need? Where do I get capital? what's available to me as a First Nations individual. And so at the startup phase, there's so many questions. And so I want to remind individuals that once you've determined where somebody like Adriana is at in terms of startup, you can end right there. You can say, you know what? I wish you the best. I'm here as a support for you, but I'm going to pass you on to a business advisor. I'm going to pass you on to Futurepreneur, or I'm going to pass you on to Trista with the Cooperatives First, wherever that individual needs to go. And then your role can be finished right there. I would encourage you, though, before you do that, that you at least get to know the people that you're passing individuals onto, whether it's an organization, whether it's an individual, whether it's a business advisor, and that because you want to have that credibility, but you're also establishing a relationship of trust, not only with Adriana, but with other entrepreneurs. And so if that's where you're going to end, because you've got all this other stuff going on that needs your attention, and you're not a subject matter expert in terms of other resources, that's fine. That's good. But I would at least encourage you to at least research the person or the program or where you're referring those individuals to. And I would also encourage you, because if Adriana is part of your treaty territory or one of your nations or part of your province, you also want to do some follow-up. You want to make sure that, if you've passed her on to a business advisor, that she's done the work and that business advisor has met her needs. And if not, have maybe another resource for her to access. But always do your follow-up. And I know it's tough because there's so many moving parts in this world, but I would encourage, just as economic development officer or a business advisor, that you at least go to that point. So I don't know where everybody's expertise level is in terms of entrepreneurship, but one of the biggest things that we always talk about is that business plan. So why is it so important to have a business plan? And where do we start in terms of creating a business plan? And there's so much information out there that, what is it? Do I need to research my market? Do I need to figure out what kind of legal structure that I'm going to have? And what's the differences between a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a limited partnership, a joint venture, a corporation, and or a cooperative? Like, there's so much information. Understanding what your budget is. And that budget isn't just your at-home budget, but really understanding a marketing strategy, development plan, an operation plan. And so those financials also in terms of cash flow. So it can be a little bit overwhelming from taking an idea and actually putting it into a plan. Some business plans, there are templates online, and depending on where you're pathfinding that individual to for resources, many of those individuals have their own business plans and guides. The challenge with a business plan is that it's going to be the foundation in terms of capital. So if you're actually going forward to ask for a micro grant or a loan or seed funding or some of the other things that are coming up, that business plan usually needs to be solid. So one of the beautiful things that some of our First Nations do for their members is that they take some of their economic development budget and they say, you know what, it's so small, we can't really hire anybody to do ECDev on our First Nation, but what we're going to do is that we're going to support our membership in terms of entrepreneurship. So they'll almost do like a little bit of a pitch or an application process. And so Adriana could go to her home nation just to see if there's an opportunity for them to assist her in terms of startup, or locating somebody that can help her to develop that business plan. Now, there's two chains of thought on this. Is you can hire somebody, you can hire Patricia Crowe and say, hey, I need you to create a business plan for me. That's great. However, you're the one that this is your plan. You have to sell it. You have to market it. This is your business. And so make sure that as an entrepreneur that they're involved in that process. This is as basic as vision, mission, your company description. And as I said, even researching the market, demographics. And so there are, just about in every province, there are things like BizPal, BIZPAL, which is a national business assistance. And if you put in where you're from, Ontario, Winnipeg, Calgary, Regina, it'll give you a list of everything that you need to do to create your permits, to create your legislation, your business. I apologize, I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, BizPal, best friend. And so that's a great foundation in terms of where to start. So then we have individuals like Destiny Peters who have been in business for a couple years. So now she's looking in terms of scaling up. So this could be an expansion of services. So initially she started with just basic hair care. Now she's doing, as you can see in the pictures, more additional services. It could also be an expansion of products, whether she's going into skincare, moving beyond hair care, or it could just be an expansion of her business. This could be locations. And so when entrepreneurs are ready to scale up, it's challenging because there seems to be a lot of resources available to you when you're starting. But then once you're scaling up and you're expanding and you're doing well, it's like, where do we go from here? What's available to us now? So it's a reminder that there are resources out there. And the biggest thing is if you're working with a business advisor, those individuals can help direct you. I'm just going to mention a couple resources. And so through Women's Enterprise Organization of Canada, they deliver the WEOC national loan. And it's a program that helps with women who are going through startups, scale-ups, expansions. And they also offer wraparound programs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's also here in the Prairies Can also has an Economic Development Canada, and they have an ongoing open competition, ongoing basis of expressions of interest for business scale up and productivity. So they have BSP, and those are interest-free, repayable funding loans. If you're in doubt, Can-Do had a beautiful presentation about a month ago from Innovation Canada. And the Innovation Canada is such a beautiful website. So you just go in there and you put in what it is that you're looking for. And so if you're looking for loans or grants or funding resources for entrepreneurship and or businesses or corporations, they will provide you with the list of the resources that they have. Another organization, and unfortunately, sorry, I just need a quick drink. I apologize for that. So the the Paro Center for Women's oh, the smoke is really, really bothering me. I apologize, but I'm going to continue. The Paro Center for Women's Enterprise is based out of Ontario. But what I remind individuals is that don't stop yourself from accessing the resources that they have. So what I mean by that is that a lot of the resources and webinar or websites that I'm going to be sharing later, they will have videos, they will have templates, they will have made up for their members, but you can access all of that stuff online. It's online, it's available. And so whether you're from Saskatchewan, whether you're from Alberta or from BC, doesn't matter where you're from, you can still access some of their free online resources. It's, if you're signing up for their services, then of course, then you have to be from that particular area. So when you're establishing financial sustainability with your commercial bank, one of the challenges when you're talking to entrepreneurs is as soon as you start talking about finances or credit or establishing credit or there's a lot of concerns, especially on reserve in terms of assets and what you can use. And so we're going to talk about, you know, NACA and the services that they have. But individuals like Destiny, they've already been through all of that. And so they've already established a good working relationship with their commercial institution or with their financial bank. And so again, you can reapply. Some of the services for startups does have a time frame. So after 2 years of being in business or 3 years of being in business, then you can reapply for a grant or a non-repayable loan. Lots of people don't read the fine print, and that's why individuals that are business advisors can help you navigate through those waters. And so so programs do exist out there specifically for scale-ups, and we'll go into sorry, I apologize. We'll talk a little bit more in terms of sources of capital as we go through. So the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So when we talk about an ecosystem, I always remind people, don't make it complicated. We all live in an ecosystem, you know, whether it's the plants, whether it's the trees, whether it's the animals, whether it's our cities that we're in, our home communities, that is our ecosystem. And so the beautiful thing about ecosystems is that they're all around us and they surround us. And when we talk about the entrepreneurship ecosystem, it's the same thing. Just think of it as the community and all the resources and everything built around the entrepreneur to support the entrepreneur and to promote the entrepreneur. And so I'm going to just go through this really quickly. And please, again, if you have any questions on this. So there's different models of ecosystems that are out there. So I ended up choosing the 5C model. And the 5C model is easy to remember: coaching, capital, connections, climate, and culture. The other thing, though, is that it's also a model that can be used in a small center, whether it's rural, whether it's First Nation, whether it's a small region. And so when we're working with Indigenous entrepreneurs, a lot of times they, you know, as I stated, they could be just in their own home community, they could be doing an at-home business, or they might be in a bigger center in terms of municipality. And so every region, every province, even nationally, this ecosystem is going to be a little bit different. If you're First Nations, it's going to be a little bit different. And if you're Métis, it's going to be a little bit different. And we'll get into some of those distinctions as we go forward. So the first C is around coaching. And this is really, what is your skill set? And so when you're taking an idea or a concept or a vision and you're moving that into a business, then you need to really be able to be truthful with yourself in terms of your ability and your skill set. And part of a business plan will look at your strengths, will look at your weaknesses, will look at your opportunities and your threats. And so we might be good in terms of visionaries, but are we practical? Do we have financial acumen? Do we understand, whatever balance sheets, and or do we need to get somebody in as a resource? What about marketing? What about branding? What about social media? What about all these other things that come into it? And so really understanding what your skill set is. And some people have had lots of success, especially, around consulting or providing mental health services or whatever it would be, because they're really good connectors and they're really, genuine individuals. Plus, that's where their education has brought them. Now, with anything with a skill set, it can be developed and it can be nurtured. And so there are education organizations that are out there. There are specific entrepreneurship programs that are available to individuals. So education, training, and then if you feel, you know what, I don't need that. I got this. Sometimes it's good to just talk to a coach, somebody that's had that experience. And it doesn't matter what age you are, but I know that we'll talk about coaching a little bit more, but it gives you somebody that you can use as a sounding board. And again, going back, that we're not making judgments of your idea, but we're there to encourage you, to support you, to help you, to pathfind you to those resources that are available to you. And so the next step is capital. We talked a little bit about financial capital, but also human capital. How are we going to hire staff? Do we need to hire staff? What if we keep growing? And then, so all of that needs to come into place. Social capital, and then the connections that we have are the resources, the online resources, the relationships that we have, our networks that we have, and mentors. I find that a lot of individuals feel left out, or that they feel alone and they feel like they're on this little island somewhere and that they don't have any help. And so even if you're on a First Nation or a remote community, you have access to resources that you might not think that you do have access to. The climate, when we talk about that word, these are things like regulations, taxation, on-reserve taxation, off-reserve taxation, permits, and investments. So that's the climate that we live in. So depending on which territory that you're from, which province that you're from, you're going to have different taxation that impacts you. On-reserve taxation is different from off-reserve taxation. So KPMG created a really good book on Indigenous taxation that's available. They're updating to their second version or their second edition. And it really breaks down starting a business on reserve versus off-reserve. And then the culture is not what we would typically think in terms of Indigenous culture. The culture, when it comes to that ecosystem, is our community. Is our community supportive of us? Is our community going to help us? Is our community, what's the perception? And so that community can be your family, can be your friends, it can be, your nation. And so when you're taking your business idea and you're moving it into a business plan and into action, that's why it's really important to do not just market research, but is it going to be supported? Is there not just a market for, let's just talk about Adriana's skirts, or I'll even bring up, Michelle asked where I got the earrings from. And so these earrings were made by Helen Sunshine, and she's on Insta at Helen Sun 48. So if you want to look her up. And so is it going to be supported? So as Indigenous people, we always, shop local. We try to support our Indigenous entrepreneurs. We try to go to our Indigenous gas bars and convenience stores. And as soon as people, know that you're an Indigenous shop or a salon or a business, a lot of people will come and offer that support. So all of these elements make up the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So we talked about coaching earlier, and I wanted to bring up Kendall Netmaker. And if you are a Can-Do member, you know that Can-Do and Kendall teamed up together to create an Indigenous coaching program for youth. I actually watch Kendall on LinkedIn because I have such respect for individuals that have just built themselves up from it's not from nothing, because we none of us have come from nothing, but from humble beginnings. And he had to learn on his own. Nobody held his hand, nobody walked him through the process. And he had to learn how to, market himself, how to speak, how to be a communicator. And same thing, what we were talking about earlier about that ecosystem. So Can-Do is part of that ecosystem, and they're helping to support Kendall in what he's doing, but also to support other youth. And so that's just one example of coaching that's available to individuals. Now, this is specifically just for youth, but I'm not a youth, and I jump on there. and so so Kendall's available as a coach, but there's lots of individuals that are out there, and sometimes you don't know until you ask. In terms of if individuals are interested in coaching and or mentoring you. So this particular coaching program focuses on leadership skills, resiliency, and of course, confidence. A lot of times people just lack the confidence, and that's also evident when you're getting prepared to do pitches, or when you're asking for seed funding or talking to angel investors. There are people that help you with your pitch in terms of your 2 minutes, what you do, how you're going to get there. And so coaching is part of that ecosystem, but so is training. So Tia LaRock Graham was kind enough to lend her quote and her face. So Tia works with, in Saskatchewan, we have the SIT, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. It is their innovation and entrepreneurship program. And so her quote is, for real change to happen, we all have to work together to lift each other up and to create a community instead of fostering competition. And when we talk about business, we don't always, we see the competition, because that's the kind of patriarchal way of doing business, is that, oh, you got to know who your competitors are, and like Tim Hortons and every other coffee shop, that's competition. And when we talk about community, there's so much out there that we come from a perspective of that there's enough there for all of us. There's enough out there for all of us to participate and for all of us to be successful. So capital. If you don't qualify for a loan, there are microgrants that are available. There are organizations, but however, a lot of people are crowdsourcing. And when we think about crowdsourcing, what does that mean? And it's really just fundraising. It's an opportunity to fundraise, and it's where we ask our family and friends, do you know what? do you want to invest in me? Do you believe in me? Do you think that you can help me out in terms of getting started? And surprisingly enough, there are individuals that have raised thousands of dollars just through crowdsourcing. And what they've also asked is looked at their clients. And in some communities, what they've done is they've created these peer networks where it's individuals, like I could be a peer, I could come in and Tara might be wanting to start a business. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to invest in you. I don't have time to be an entrepreneur. I don't have time to start my own business, but I have a good job and I've got a good opportunity. So I want to pass that opportunity on. And so that's what crowdsourcing is. Community futures, we'll talk about them a little bit later, but they're in a lot of communities and are available to individuals in your region. Angel investors are exactly what I just said earlier. They're individuals that have had some successes in their life. So they pool together sometimes $25,000 per angel investor. Then they go out and they invest in businesses and in entrepreneurs. Seed funding is grant funding, mostly on the tech side. There's pitch competitions, there's financial institutions, including our AFIs. I'll talk more about that. There's micro grants, and of course, there's bursaries. So if you haven't heard of NACA, so NACA is the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. So they're doing a little bit of a name change. So they've been the Aboriginal financial institutions for a long time, and now they're kind of moving into Indigenous financial institutions. So they have 58 IFIs across Canada. You can go to their website to find where your IFI is. They help, like, so in Saskatchewan, we would have like CEF, CCDF, SMEDCOs. So there's 5 Métis financial institutions, and the remainder of them are First Nations. So they would have individuals like Melanie Sunchild who can help you in terms of qualifying for a loan. So this would be a portion that you would have to come up with. And then they've got youth rates and adult rates, and then a portion of that is non-repayable loans. So developmental lending, business financing, and of course support to those 3 different throughout the provinces and territories. So Tristan Zachow was kind enough to lend his face and his quote. So SMEDCO works with Métis entrepreneurs here in Saskatchewan, but when I was doing my research, Manitoba has an amazing, amazing ecosystem for their entrepreneurs. Alberta has some really good ecosystems, and of course, so does BC. So every province is a little bit different in terms of who their support networks are, and every province is going to be a little bit different in terms of how they deliver those. So Tristan's just reminding us that Métis economic growth is of course important, and SMEDCO does have the supports for Métis entrepreneurs to achieve that growth, and that they strive to provide products and services to their entrepreneurs so that they can succeed in their business ventures. So one of the services that they do provide is that they have a business directory of their Métis-owned businesses, and that they 100% certify that those businesses are Métis-owned. And so sometimes people will say, oh, I have an Indigenous business, and so, or I'm partnered with Indigenous people. And so there's different definitions of what constitutes an Indigenous business. So networking, collaborating, of course, are very beneficial, and they love working together. I'm just going to go through these next slides really quickly because I don't want to. We're kind of tapping into our tail end. These slides, from my understanding, are going to be shared with you, anybody that signed up. And so these are lots of national organizations, national resources, and just like what we saw with NACA, is that those resources trickle down into regional, provincial, and regional and local. And so, so Indigenous Innovation Initiative, you can read about that, but that's around seed funding, access to capital. And again, I believe they've got closing dates on theirs, but the website is there. And again, I'm going to quickly go through these. This one is really close and dear to my heart. And so NACA created Indigenous Women Entrepreneurship Program. And so in 2022, they launched across 32 IFIs in Canada, and it's current. So right now, the program, Indigenous women, Métis, and First Nations have access to business support officers, routine workshops, training, microloans, grant, mentorship program. So that's coming up this fall. And so right now, they're working really hard to connect signing up individuals that want to mentor new Indigenous, First Nations, and or Métis entrepreneurs. And so if you want to learn more about this particular program, the website is there and the contact information is there. The National Indigenous Women Entrepreneurs Ecosystem. And what I was going to say earlier, and I apologize, there's a reason that women end up having more supports, and we'll notice that with the Women Entrepreneurs Knowledge Hub. They've released reports in terms of the reason that there's been so much financial support for women entrepreneurs. And so we try not to exclude our male entrepreneurs, but some of these, I apologize, are just specifically for Indigenous women. So on that website, as I was saying, they've accumulated huge amounts of videos, interviews, panel discussions, ideas from entrepreneurs, subject matter experts. So you could go there and find the resources that you need. I'm a little bit of a rabbit hole person, so I like to kind of dig around and see what's out there. Futurepreneur, our contact there is Noah Wilson. He's in our territory, but they're a national corporation that looks after Indigenous individuals aged 18 to 39. So at the beginning, when you're asking those questions and saying, you know, I apologize, but I need to confirm, do you identify as being a person between the age of 18 and 39? And some people just start laughing and saying, no, I haven't been 39 for like, 10 years, but you don't know. So you have to ask. And so Futurepreneur has amazing resources for individuals. And in fact, Kendall Netmaker was a Futurepreneur alumni. They've increased their funding up to 60,000. And again, you get access to an expert mentor, all their resources, and they'll help you create your business plan and also bring it to life. So a great resource for youth. So we talked about community futures earlier. And so there's 267 community futures organizations across Canada. And so they work with small business services, small business loans. They've got tools, again, training and events. And so, again, their website is there. So it's a national economic development program, but again, down locally into your region. I mentioned cooperatives first. The only reason I'm bringing this forward is because out of all those legal structures, so people don't think about cooperatives sometimes, but however, they have such beautiful resources. So if you want to learn more about cooperatives, if you want to learn, how that might work for your community, I would encourage you to visit their website. They've got great webinars. The team over there is always so friendly and accessible. And Trista, I'm going to screw up your last name, and I apologize. But Trista Piwapiskanonis, that was really bad. I'm laughing at myself, not at you. But anyway, Trista is just an amazing resource with Cooperatives First. And so I would encourage you, if if as you're building your plan, think about if a cooperative may work, you know, for your business plan, or for your community. Women Entrepreneurs Knowledge Hub, and I got the WEHK transcribed there. Anyway, they're a national network and accessible digital platform. So they have a shared platform. And so if you're a woman entrepreneur, you just have to jump on there, become a free member, and join their platform. And in that platform, what they do is it's what they call a give and take. So it's kind of like, if you're gonna take something, you're gonna have to give something, or you're you know, to receive. And so they've created this platform where you can go in and you can just ask any question that you want. You can share your knowledge, and so it's a connector to other entrepreneurs. They've got 10 regional hubs across the country, and they also started the Indigenous Women Entrepreneurs Gift Guide. They've got some amazing reports. Again, another resource. They don't do financing or any of that capital side. They're more in terms of the resources and networks that are working on behalf of women entrepreneurs. Export Development Canada, another great resource. So if you're in that stage of your business that you're ready to export, that you're ready to move into e-commerce, move into trade, they have amazing Indigenous supports through exporting, selling goods, services produced in Canada to customers in other countries. So again, I would encourage you to Google some of these resources, make the connections that you need to, and there you've got a lot of supports that are out there. And so I know that we're kind of wrapping up in terms of time, and I apologize if I'm going over. So Be the Drum is another, these are business advisors. And so Native Women's Association of Canada, they've created entrepreneurial navigators, mentorship programs. And so you just sign up for the program. Then you can put in your company. You don't need to have a website. You can use it as a resource to promote your company. So they've got the Women's Business Directory and other resources. So just to tie everything up, it's a reminder of what we said at the very beginning of who these resources are for. And as business advisors and or pathfinders to resources, we have to remind ourselves of the people on the ground that we're supporting. And these are just images of products, local products. And you can see that, you know, it's working with wood, it's working with deer hide, it's working with natural materials. That's chaga, blueberries, bannock. And so those are medicines. And so when we think about entrepreneurship, sometimes it's bigger corporations, but it's also, as I said, small or medium-sized. And the skill set is just amazing. This is Métis beadwork by Minnie Bowden at the very beginning. And these are star blanket quilts made by Jackie Bird. And I want to end with Jordan Wapass, who's lent his name and his quote. As an entrepreneur, I want to remind individuals that you have all these resources, but at the end of the day, I'm amazingly shocked and surprised that people have just went for it. They haven't accessed any of those resources. And they just said, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to use my savings. And I met a woman who used her Indian residential school dollars. And she said she wanted to turn something tragic into something beautiful. And she created her own business out of that money. And so Jordan, when I spoke to him on the phone, he said, you know what, Patricia, just go for it. Taking the first step is a journey into the unknown. Believe in your idea, pair it with strategy, balance it with a willingness to strengthen your financial acumen to embrace the challenges ahead. Every obstacle is an opportunity to learn and to grow. The journey may be long, but the rewards are immeasurable. So get out of your own way and just go for it. Thank you. Kineniskomitin. And I apologize, I don't know, Tara, if there were questions. Do we have time for questions?
There were no questions in the chat, but if anybody has questions, go ahead. Well, I have a question.
Okay, good. I love questions.
Well,
Keeps me on my toes.
You gave a lot of resources in your PowerPoint. How can we get and you went through them pretty quick, obviously because of time, but can we get a copy of the resources or a list of the resources?
Well, I know that the PowerPoint's going to be shared with everybody. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't really have a separate list of all those resources, but I do know that FHQ Developments in our territory, you just Google them. They have a business guide that they've created. I also Women Entrepreneurs Knowledge Hub has a business guide that they've created. So a lot of those resources are encapsulated in those guides. But yes, I apologize, only in the presentation and in those business guides, which I can share with you.
Awesome. Ken?
Now, I've got a quick question. Now, is the WEH, I didn't get what the H stands for, WEHK, is that the only organization where you can call and just ask a question? Because oftentimes people I don't want somebody to do it for me, but I've got a question I need to get from point A to point B, and I need somebody to walk me 3 steps to get me started. Is WEHK the only organization that does that? Ask me anything?
No. Where are you located, Ken? Where's your territory?
I'm in Ontario, but this is for across Canada. I mean, Ontario specifically, but it was a general question.
Yeah. And so depending on, and again, I don't know what your structure is like. So if you're part of a tribal council, if you're part of a nation, if you're a part of a Métis region, or if you're just a general non in the main centers. So Community Futures would probably be a good start for you in your territory. The organization Women Entrepreneurs Knowledge Hub, WEKH, Ashley Richard, and she would be like the Indigenous navigator for them. However, they're more on the research side. So they do the reports, and they've created these hubs where individuals such as myself participate in quarterly meetings on how we can best support entrepreneurs, how can we best navigate, to help some of the gaps or the challenges. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a short story. Had somebody, I checked in with somebody who's changing their business and said, I'm not seeing opportunities. And I said, well, wait a minute, let me check into it. And it only took, part of a day, but in my time, it only took like maybe 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to help them find opportunities that they just didn't know how to navigate. That's all. So it was just a quick question, but they didn't know who to ask, and they were afraid to ask. So yeah, thank you.
Good. No, thank you for sharing that, Ken. It's really important. And it's something that we're taught traditionally, is that we have to learn how to ask. So we're raised to observe, we're raised to watch, and that's how we learn, but we were never really pushed to ask. And so I always, we're not going to learn if we don't ask. And so thank you for that. That's
Yeah. Just one more point. When somebody asks us, we want to show how smart we are. We give them an answer. It may not be the right answer, but we just love showing how smart we are.
Yeah, good. I'm sorry. I want to be cognizant of Candu and their time and everybody's schedule today. Is there any other particular questions?
I think Punita, is there any way to reach you? Your contact information.
Yeah, there is a way to reach me. If you want to email me, my personal email is skindgenouseed@gmail.com.
FK?
No, SK for Saskatchewan.
Oh, SK,
Yeah, I can put it in the chat.
Indigenous.
I knew that there was going to be lots of information because there, I put it into the chat. Because as I said, there's so many resources out there. But as Ken pointed out, until you know what's out there, and that's why it's so important, like through Indigenous Business Link in Alberta, they do have advisors. That is a provincial organization. However, those advisors, that's their job, is to at least, where are you on your journey and how do I get you to the next steps?
Do a lot of these resource places fun? Like, I know you speak about training, and I'm actually an entrepreneur myself, but I do like tiny tattoos and I do tattooing eyebrows. My trainings are all a lot online, and I pay for them myself. I spend probably over 15,000 of my own money of training and learning how to tattoo and all of my product and this and that. I only spend my own money because I don't know myself if places like these resources fund things like that, because a lot of them are online. They're not actually institutions like a school, like a post-secondary or anything like that. So
Yeah.
do they fund those kind of things?
So I would encourage you to reach out to your IFI to ask those questions in terms of what they do cover, like in terms of your products, for sure. In terms of the training or the programs that you're taking to be an entrepreneur, there might be other resources that you can tap into. So even like provincially, we have our career training, but we also know that there's ISETS training. And so have you heard of ISETS? It used to be assets. So it's skills, employment and training. Okay. And so they would be able to, hopefully, if nothing else, guide you to where you need to go. So if you're off reserve or on reserve, you will have access to ISETS training. So sometimes there's places like NWAC that can break you down regionally in terms of what's available to you through ISETS training. And as an individual, that's there for men and for women. That might be something that you can tap into.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And depending on the length of your course, there could be other resources that you could tap into in terms of funding.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. All right, I think we're ready to wrap up here. Anything else? Anybody? Any questions? We're good. Nope. All right. All right. Thank you, Patricia, for presenting with us today. Very informative for a lot of entrepreneurs. And everybody else, thank you for attending, and we will see you next week for another webinar. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.